There we go. We are recording. I think everybody here knows this spiel. The meeting will be recorded. We may use excerpts from it. If you don't want to be recorded, run away screaming now. Too fast. Welcome to Online Presenters Toastmasters. This is where we learn skills for better webinars and online events. We want to say a thank you to RingCentral for allowing us to use the RingCentral meetings platform. It's integrated with a bunch of their other products. They actually just came out with a new product, their collaborative meetings, which is just a bundle of the GLIP collaboration software that I've shown some of you, and it's shown here on screen, and the online meetings capability. And they would like me to let you know that the cloud is winning in business communications and RingCentral is winning in the cloud. We do advise you to be aware of your audio feed. Use a headset or earbuds so that we don't get awful feedback. Mute your mic when it's not your turn. And I think you, again, all know this. We don't have any guests here today, right? So we can steam past the how to become a member as well. And that means that it's showtime. And I can turn things over to Rolando to run us through our meeting for the evening. And Rolando, I'm going to give you the host controls so that if you need to mute people, if people are misbehaving, you can have that superpower. So you will see that in the participants panel. There's a control that says mute all, and you can also click next to anybody's name or anybody's thumbnail image to mute them as necessary. And I'm going to shut up and mute myself as well. So you're on, Rolando.
Thank you, David. Hi, everybody. Hello, fellow Toastmasters. Welcome to Online Presenters. My name is Rolando Goldman, the Toastmaster for tonight. Our theme for tonight is daylight saving time. Over the weekend, I had to change my clock up to an hour, and I enjoyed it. I love daylight saving time. Coming from work, it was still daylight, 6:30. Our meeting is divided into 3 segments: prepared speeches, table topics, and evaluation. But I cannot do this meeting by myself. I have some exceptional helpers. Our first helper, Sam, the accounter. Would you please tell us your role, Sam?
Absolutely, Mr. Toastmaster. My role today will be to listen to the speakers and pay attention to any us or any other filler words for that matter, any so's, any ahams that are used instead of pauses.
Thank you, Sam. Our next helper, David, the timer. Would you please explain your role?
All right. And actually, this is something that we're trying to put some effort into being better at, is making sure that we do a good job of keeping time. And that means that when you are the speaker, you should try and make sure that you can find the timer in the video feeds. So when you're sharing your screen, they'll be shuffled off to the right-hand side. And just tell the Toastmaster if you need a moment to find the timer's image. We'll give you credit for that. We won't be mean to you. So you're going to see green, yellow, red in the background behind me. I think it is also a best practice. Arlene always did this, was to have some kind of a chime so that if people have lost track of the video from the timer, that they have an indication, and particularly if they're running way over their maximum time, we need to make sure that they know that. And we're encouraging the Toastmaster of the day to also keep track so that if somebody does run badly over your time, we don't have the whole meeting thrown out of whack. So just a few thoughts about doing a better job with timer, and I will attempt to be a good example of that today. Mr. Toastmaster.
Thank you, David. Our next helper, the grammarian, Lou Brown. Will you please explain your role, please?
Certainly, Mr. Toastmaster, as grammarian, I will be looking for creative uses of language. I will be looking for incorrect use of language. I will also be looking for usage of word of the day, which I did not see on the agenda. However, I believe that's probably something I should come up with as grammarian. So in honor of daylight savings time, we'll have a word of the day as, it's hard to come up with a really good one that people could easily use in a sentence. I'm open to suggestions. As you can see, I'm struggling here.
How about diurnal?
Twilight.
Twilight. Ooh, I love that one. Okay, yes, I'm not sure who just said it, but thank you. Twilight, wonderful. Definition, twilight, that point in time which comes around dusk, I guess I'll say. Hopefully that's correct. So I'll also be looking for usage of the word twilight, whether it be that definition or even a movie reference. Back to you, Mr. Toastmaster.
Thank you, Lou. Our vote counter, Jim Barber, will you please explain your role?
With pleasure, Mr. Toastmaster. My fellow Toastmasters, I'm the vote counter this evening. I have the awesome and difficult responsibility of counting the votes. If I run out of fingers, I have my official from the twilight of the 20th century calculator that can get me into double digits, and I will count the votes. And if anybody wants to sway my vote count, I accept credit cards as well as cash.
Thank you, Jim. Our chat monitor, John Quick, please explain your role.
Mr. Toastmaster, as the chat monitor, I'll be watching everything that goes on in the chat, and I'm going to be summarizing it in a side document, and I'll paste it in towards the end of the meeting, a nice summary for everyone. However, look at Jim Barber's comments now because certain innuendo may need to be censored from the final summary. Mr. Toastmaster.
Thank you, John. Our watcher, Graham, would you please explain your role?
Yes, Mr. Toastmaster, my role as watcher tonight is to see how everybody is looking on screen, because one of the things that we're trying to learn here as online presenters is how effective we are at using this particular medium. And so I'll be watching for good or bad backdrops, for example, for people who use gestures that go outside of the screen so that their arms disappear like mine just did, all those sorts of things.
Thank you, Graham. Please try to use the word of the day, twilight, in your speech tonight. Now, let's start with our first segment of the meeting, the prepared speeches. Our first speaker will be Jim Dent. And Jim Dent will be speaking from the Dynamic Leadership Level 1 manual, Mastering Fundamentals, the icebreaker. His title is How I Choose My Two Paths. Jim Dent has earned 2 DTM since he joined in May of 2010. He is only an HCG and 1 ALS requirement away from his 3rd DTM. 6 months ago, Jim was going to finish up his 3rd DTM during the transition period while studying pathways simultaneously. Around the beginning of January, Jim decided that he will stop working on his 3rd DTM and focus 100% on pathways as soon as it rolls out in his district. The reason is so he can devote time to help other members on the pathways journey. His speech tonight is his pathway icebreaker speech for his first path. The speech is 4 to 6 minutes. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Jim Dent, How I Choose My Two Paths. Jim Dent, over to you, Jim.
Good, thank you. I'm going to pull up my slide. Can everybody see the slide?
Yes, we can.
Great. Okay. How many people here have already started Pathways? Raise your hand. And how many people have already selected their first path or their first two paths? Great. What I'm going to tell you tonight is how I chose my two paths. One of the first things I decided was I was not going to let a computer give me its opinion of which path it thinks I should be taking. I've heard too many stories from other people that no matter how you answer the questions, you still get the same path recommendations. And I don't like the idea of filling out the survey to get it. So I did my own analysis method, and I'm going to go through how I decided which paths I decided to choose. Now, the district I'm in with the Brick and Mortar Club, I'm in Colorado. We actually roll out on March 20th at 9 o'clock in the morning. So I'm in the twilight of the final days before rollout. And I've got permission to do this one a week in advance for my VPE from that club, who was going to try to be here tonight but didn't. So y'all know there's 10 different paths to choose from, and I had to decide which two paths I wanted to pick. There's 10 of them. And it wasn't really easy. I actually spent several months analyzing, reviewing, reading descriptions. So I'm going to go over how I chose what I wanted to do. One of the things I did was I looked at the descriptions of each of the 10 paths. Now, this didn't really give me a lot of information, but what I found was from one district, I found from District 80 was I found a 221-page list of all the projects, all the summaries, as you can see on the left, of how each level or each path is broken down by what's in the level, what are the mandatory courses, and what are the electives. And it includes the evaluation form. One of the things that I found was many of the speeches in some projects, even though it was a speech, there was a project you had to do before the speech. So that was part of my decision making. Which projects do I want to do? Then what I did was I made my own spreadsheet Excel matrix of listing the paths along the top and then listing all the projects. And what I added to it was, is it a speech and how long was the speech requirement? One of my first ideas was to pick something that I could do within the clubs without requiring 20-minute speeches that would take up club meeting, which would possibly force me to do the speech at a district event such as a TLI or a conference. And for that reason, I actually ruled out presentation mastery. So that came off the list right now. So now I only have 9 paths to choose from. So how did I still pick? Well, one of my thoughts was I want to do an HPL as part of my path. The HPL is no longer required for the DTM level, but it is required in some of the paths. And looking at it, I found out it's required in persuasive influence, effective coaching, and innovative planning. So now for my first path, I'm down to one of these 3. What really interested me out of these 3 after reading the descriptions was the effective coaching, which is something I've done a lot in the past, one-on-one coaching, and also remote coaching with clubs. And what attracted me to this particular path was what I've highlighted here is it focuses on understanding and building consensus, which is also a form of team building and creating collaborative teams. which is actually one of the other paths. It also contributes to the development of others. When you're coaching or mentoring individuals, you're really developing them. That was one of my goals for jumping into pathways, was to help develop others. The members of my club here in Colorado Springs, most of them are going to jump right into pathways. And so I decided I was going to help out with them so that the VPE and the base camp managers aren't overburdened. And I can take my experience and help them develop their journey in pathways. Effective coaching also emphasizes the importance of effective interpersonal communication. So these aspects attracted me much more than the description for the other two paths, persuasive influence and innovative planning. So now I've got my first path. It's going to be effective coaching, or one of my first two. So now I got to choose my second path. And again, I went back to the same philosophy. What's left now is dynamic leadership, leadership development, motivational strategies, strategic relationships, team collaboration, and visionary communication. Well, one of the things I did was reading through the descriptions and what they're focused on. Strategic relationships is very much related to effective coaching, along with team collaboration and visionary communications. Because when you're coaching or mentoring somebody, you're also trying to make sure they have a vision, even as an individual. What do they want to accomplish? Their personal goals. And the same thing with motivational strategies. If you're coaching, if you're motivating people, or you're also finding what motivates the individual, what attracts them to do something, or what do they want to do versus what do they don't want to do, and what touches their heart. And then I decided I really wanted a path with the word leadership in it, just for identity purposes. And I looked at these two paths that are left as dynamic leadership and leadership development. And the descriptions both attracted me, but the more I looked at it, was leadership development sounds more like leadership 101. And dynamic leadership sounds like a 400 level leadership course in college. So I'm really down to these two, and I'm leaning towards dynamic leadership. And based on the descriptions, that's what really attracted me, was the dynamic leadership instruction.
Pardon me, Jim, you're at 8 minutes.
Oh, am I already? I didn't see the timing lights. Okay, so I'm sorry about that. So my second path I picked was dynamic leadership because of what it focuses on in the descriptions. So my two paths I chose were dynamic leadership for these reasons and effective coaching for these reasons. And tonight, this is my icebreaker for the dynamic leadership path. Back to our Toastmaster.
Thank you, Jim. Very informative. We wish we had more time. Our next speaker is Dagmara, and she'll be speaking from the Dynamic Leadership Manual. It should be Computer Communication Manual, how to say it. The title is Tiger Moms. Are Tiger Moms superior to regular moms? Does the parenting style really works? The speech is 5 to 7 minutes. Are Tiger Moms superior to regular mom? Tiger Moms. Over to you, Dagmar.
Are there any parents here? Please raise your hand. Thank you. I see plenty of them. Well, that's great, because today I'm going to talk about a controversial topic of a tiger mom parenting style. But most importantly, I want to know, does it really work? Does it bring better results? So who are tiger moms? Tiger moms are very strict parents, and they have extremely ambitious plans for their kids. To be a tiger mom, you don't necessarily have to be a Chinese. In fact, you don't even have to be a female. I know plenty of tiger mom male parents all over the world. But the most prominent example of a tiger mom that I know of is Amy Chua, who wrote a memoir about her raising her two daughters, Sophia and Lulu. She is a Chinese living in the USA. So how does strict parenting style work out for Amy Chua and her two daughters, Sophia and Lulu? Well, it worked out pretty well for sweet Sophia, because Sophia was very obedient. The sweet Sophia revered her mother. She was listening to every demanding request and accepting them with huge alacrity. She was all into that. So no wonder she ended up in an Ivy League university. And she was obviously a great student, and she was a concert pianist at a very young age. So you can say that it was a huge success, according to tiger moms. But the same parenting style was a total disaster, an extremely extreme failure when it comes to the second daughter, Lulu. Lulu, the younger one, the enfant terrible, nasty, independent, rebellious. Oh, she did so many problems for her mom. And when Amy was forcing her to play violin, they were fighting all the time. So yes, they were using derogatory language, and they were blaming each other. And basically, Lulu hated her mom. So once, which was very terrible, they fought so much that Lulu, in the public place, she started to throwing glass at her mom and calling her derogatory names. So after that, Amy gave up. She just said that she's not going to use this parenting style towards Lulu because it just doesn't work. And she gave up with violin as well. So as you can see, tiger moms not necessarily always achieve great results. And you know what? I really don't think that this parenting style is really bad or it's entirely bad. At the end of the day, tiger moms put a lot of time, money, and effort and invest in their kids. They also strive for excellence. They really believe that their kids can achieve the best success and they're worth it. So it's not entirely bad. So if you want to be a tiger mom, keep going, great. But I have 3 suggestions for you. So first thing, be more flexible. Not every kid can be a math genius. And trust me, there are other instruments than piano or violin. So just try to listen more to your kid and be more flexible and just look out for the gifts and talent that their kids have. You cannot tar the different kids with the same brush. The second thing that I want to suggest is to give your kids more choices. Yes, choices. Tiger moms are famous for not giving much choices to their kids and having their lives into total control. So obviously, daughters of Amy Chua, they couldn't even choose their own hobbies. But hobbies supposed to be hobbies. They're supposed to be fun. And the third thing, rewards and punishment. Tiger Mom loves using rewards to bribe their kids. They buy them expensive gifts. But if they don't manage to achieve goals, they punish them severely. But what modern psychology says about rewards? It basically say that it's a very short-term solution because you don't teach your kids about developing their own characters. So they don't have internal motivation to achieve their goals. They basically expect that they will be doing something in exchange for something. So remember, if you're a Tiger Mom, great. Just keep in mind that to improve the system and to get better results, you need to focus on flexibility, on giving your kids more choices and options, and balancing reward and punishment system. Fellow Toastmasters, thank you.
Thank you, Dagmara. Fascinating speech. Our third speaker is DTM Lois. She'll be speaking from the Competent Communications. Organize your speech. Your speech should be 5 to 7 minutes. She'll be speaking up the cuff because she just volunteered to give us a speech, so I don't have a title. Over to you, Lois.
All right, the title is Pranks by Men Are Elaborate, while Pranks by Women Are Smarter. Who here has ever played a prank on someone? You know you have. Raise that hand. Everybody's done it at some point in their life. Traditionally, when I hear my husband or my brother tell about a prank that they pulled, it was elaborate. My pranks are short and sweet. Let's talk about my husband's prank. He had a roommate that he really didn't like in college. The roommate's name was Ted. And Ted had a habit of opening up his toothpaste, putting it on his toothbrush, and then leaving the open toothpaste out. It would get all over the sink. And this drove my husband insane. He thought about it, he went to Publix and he bought oil of clove. For those of you that don't know what oil of clove is, that is something that makes your mouth numb. He worked at a hospital, so he got a syringe. When Ted bought a new toothpaste, Les went in, filled the syringe with oil of clove, and injected it into his toothpaste. The next morning, Ted brushed his tooth back. I feel kind of weird. And he looked at the tube, and it was not quite right. He went back to Publix and demanded a new tube of toothpaste from the Publix manager. The Publix manager said, I don't know what's wrong with this, but here's your new tube. The next morning, Les did the same thing and injected that in. He went back to the Publix manager and said, I never want that toothpaste again. The manager felt so bad, he gave him 2 tubes from a different container. I don't think to this day Ted really even knew what was happening. But boy, the rest of his roommates were having so much fun with this elaborate joke. Then there's my brother. My brother had 2 roommates, Dennis and John. Dennis was afraid of his shadow, especially anything that flies. Well, one night, John and my brother Steve decided they were going to pull a prank on Dennis. And I have to say, I feel very, very sorry for Dennis because they pulled a lot of pranks, and I'm just pulling one out of this entire list. Dennis was gone for the entire day. So they decided they were going to put a pulley system right above his bed. So imagine that right here is his bed. And right above his head here, he had a string that you could barely see, and it went on a high angle up into the other area. Well, Dennis happened to be having a very good time that night and was drinking quite a bit. He came home, plopped on his bed, and was just starting to go into La La Land when John and Steve crept in. Oh, did I tell you? They had bought a flying bat from Spencer Gifts. You know, the kind that goes like this and makes noise, and when you turn it on, it has the bright yellow lights? So imagine, it's 2 in the morning. They come in, they hook it up, they put it right in there, and then they start the bat moving. And Dennis wakes up from the noise, opens his eyes, see these yellow beady eyes flying right at him. He fell out of the bed, crawled to the door, and went screaming out, buck naked. Now, that's an elaborate prank, I gotta tell you. My pranks aren't quite as elaborate, but I happen to think they're funny. But that's because they're more intelligent pranks. I was driving with my brother one day down this long, long road. It was under construction, and I was about 10 or 11 years old, and I happened, for some obscure reason, read the signs with my mom. I was driving with my mom, and I'm reading the signs, and I'm reading the signs, and I'm reading the signs. The next day, my brother and I are driving down that road, and we were playing that game of How Great Are Your Eyes? And you've all played that game with your kids where you say, tell me when you can read the license plate of the car in front of you. And you figure out how close you have to be. So my brother and I are playing this game. When can you see the license plate? When can you see the license plate? And we got to that point of the road where the signs were way, way down there. I said to my brother, do you see that sign way down there? What sign? That sign, way, way down there. Yeah, you can read it, right? I don't know, can you read it? And I read it. And my brother didn't say boo. And we got to the next sign, which was way down, and I did it again. And I did this 3 or 4 times. Now, I'm a 10-year-old. I go home, I'm done, I go outside and I play. I didn't know that my brother went into his room and put a cold compress on his eyes and called my mother to tell her he was going blind. The next night at dinner, my brother says, I don't understand it. The eye doctor said my eyes are fine. Why did you go to the eye doctor? I asked. Well, I didn't want to tell you, but yesterday I couldn't see any of those signs. Of course you couldn't. I read those signs the day before. No one could read that. You know, that night I didn't have any dinner, but it was definitely worth it. So I ask you, does it have to be that elaborate prank, or can it simply be smarter? You decide. Mr. Toastmaster.
Thank you, Lois. Thank you for this hilarious speech. Very funny. Mr. Timer, may I please have the timer report for the speeches, please?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I just posted them in the chat. Jim at 8:34, but I didn't give him fair warning. I screwed up on the audible signal. Dagmara at 6:14 and Lois at 6:06.
Thank you, David. Please send your vote to Jim Barber for the best speaker. Send your vote to Jim Barber, Jim Dent, Dagmara, or Lois. We're gonna start our next segment of the meeting, which is table topics. The table topics will be led by Deborah Carr. Over to you, Deborah Carr.
We're ready. In the twilight of Sunday morning, I adjusted a couple of my clocks. Thankfully, I have everything else is on automatic, which is kind of weird that we would set our clocks back now compared to when they did that in like 1918 they did it to have better daylight for the farmers. But either way, they're done and we're into daylight savings time. So trying to think who. Everybody's got a thing, don't they? Andy Byrne. Daylight during the winter months, especially here in Michigan, people will often say, can't we just move our clocks ahead to May? If you could move time ahead, what would you do? Where would you put it?
Thank you very much. Toastmaster, Topic Master Deborah Carr. Daylight savings time actually came from New Zealand in 1876. The first country to adopt it was in 1916. It was Germany. And again, it related to the war issue that you mentioned. I was thrown off until I actually looked it up because of the movie National Treasures, in which they talked about Benjamin Franklin coming up with this idea, and the whole movie was focused on that particular issue. I think that daylight savings time has an impact dating back to the agricultural nature of the country in the early days. But at this point, as Hawaii and Arizona do not change from one side to another, they've shown that people can survive without moving the clocks forward and backward. And I think that we also can survive if you don't have to move the clocks backwards and forwards. And it helps to have an intelligent watch, like my Apple Watch, that does it for me. I don't have to worry about it at all. That's it.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I was waiting for Topic Master. Mike Walsh. Daylight savings time means losing an hour. And this year it was followed by national, which evidently it is every year, National Nap Day. You take naps, and tell us about them if you do. Some.
Madam Table Topics Master, I'm a federal civil servant, and the idea that you shouldn't look out the window all morning because you'll have nothing to do in the afternoon can sometimes be true. Most times, however, I do work quite hard, although sometimes, now and again, I do get stuck on a couple of conference calls. The ones that go on forever, that have the software engineers, and they're talking about one another about this and that, and I'm following along and I'm thinking, so I'll just lean back a little bit. I've got the headset on, and every now and again I try to jolt myself awake, but sometimes I don't. And now and again, what will actually happen is I'll look up and the conference call is over and somebody's on the other end of the phone saying, is there anybody there? So that would be the end of my day there. And then I go back to looking out the window. Madam Table Topics Master.
Thank you. Just to check, David, we are at, on my watch, where you are at 8:41. Is that one more or no? Or do you want me to scoot or take it back?
Maybe we could do one more.
One more. Okay. Just wanted to be sure. They say that napping 3 times a week can result actually in 37% of a decrease in heart-related issues, especially in your blood pressure. It can actually drop your blood pressure. So Morale, when you get fired up and your blood pressure is just a little bit higher than what it should be, how do you lower yours?
Thank you, Deborah. So if I want to lower my BP, I just don't want to go near my wife. As simple as that. So that is the foolproof way of lowering the things. So the moment we are close to a spouse, the BP is getting shorter. So that is one of the suggestions. So having the prank aside, to lower my BP, I have to keep calm. So I'm actually taking one tablet for the anxiety. So that I used to take one in the morning and one in the night. So that keeps me a little bit calmer all through the day. So that is the way I keep my BP less. And I love my wife, Deborah.
Thank you. And I turn it back to you, Rolando.
Thank you, Deborah. Thank you for those great questions. Mr. Timer, can I please have the timing for the table topics?
You may. We had Andy Byrne at 1:21. Mike Walsh at 1 minute 5 seconds. And Morale was slightly under, about 55 seconds. So the vote should be between Andy and Mike.
So Morale is disqualified, huh? So vote for your best speaker, best table topic speaker between Andy and Mike. Send your vote to Jim Barber, please. Andy or Mike? Sorry, Morale. I knew it was a funny one, but you're short. The next segment of the meeting will be evaluation. This is where the speakers find out what they do wrong and how they can improve. And this section will be led by our Toastmaster DTM Lou Brown. Please welcome to the lectern, Lou Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Toastmaster. First of all, can everyone hear me clearly? I am working on proper adjustment of my headset microphone to my mouth. Okay, if at any time you do not hear me, please let me know. I appreciate that. Okay, so the third segment of our program, as Rolando had pointed out, is the evaluation portion. We have 3 speakers who will be evaluated by 3 evaluators. The evaluations are 2 to 3 minutes with 30-second deviation. Our first speaker was Jim Dent, who is being evaluated by Graham. Graham, please conduct your evaluation, sir.
Thank you, Mr. General Evaluator. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you particularly to Jim. Now, before I begin, I should tell you that if you haven't yet had any experience with Pathways, there is a brand new evaluation form for all presentations in Pathways. But like the traditional program, what happens is the evaluator writes down their evaluation in the manual, or in this case on the form, and presents that to the speaker. But the evaluation itself should still encompass more than just what's written down, and that's what I intend doing today. Jim, I will send you your written evaluation, but your verbal evaluation, I have to say, I really love the way Jim's presentation began with, I wasn't going to let a computer tell me what to do. And that's actually true. I have to say, I've done the questionnaire a number of times, and each time it's come up with something different, but none of them that I wanted. So I like the fact that Jim said, no, I ain't going to let no stinking computer tell me what to do. But he's still a nerd, as can be told by the fact that he created a really, really useful Excel spreadsheet, which I want a copy of. And I wish I had had a copy of that, because otherwise then when I chose my first 2 paths, I wouldn't have chosen 2 paths that both have HPLs at the end of them. Anyway, there was an enormous amount of information that was given in this presentation and some really good guidance that Jim gave us. But the first observation that I would make for Jim is that there was perhaps too much information. The fact that this speech went seriously over time, and if Jim had been given his druthers, it probably would have run closer to 10 minutes rather than the 8 that it did. There was just too much information perhaps to be jammed into the time that was allowed. I love the slides. A couple of fewer slides might have been useful, but I particularly like Jim's how-to approach, because that was something that we don't often see, particularly in an icebreaker. So I congratulate Jim on that. Some great hands-on information, a little too much information perhaps, some really good use of visual material, and I commend Jim on that. And I have to say, I'm really looking forward to seeing Jim's next couple of speeches, where he has to choose any topic that he likes, but I reckon it's probably going to have to do with Pathways again, because I can tell an enthusiast. I recognize them. My enthusiasm radar is working, because like Jim, I'm an enthusiast about Pathways. Mr. General Evaluator, I yield control.
Thank you, sir, and thank you for an awesome evaluation. Our second speaker, Dagmara, will be evaluated by Roger from Dallas. Please take it away, Mr. Roger.
Thank you, Mr. General Evaluator. Dagmara, first and foremost, the one thing that cuts across your whole speech and the greatest aspect of your speech is your credibility. When you spoke, I want to listen. I'm guessing the rest of the audience would want to listen and trust your research. I'll tell you more about that a little bit later. But I will turn my attention a little bit for now on how you can improve and make that even better. And that is accentuate your vocal variety and body language. The reason why I say accentuate is that you actually had it, but you had it a tiny little bit. So when you rewatch the video, go back to the spot when you start talking about the first daughter of the author Amy and the second daughter. When you transition from the first to the second, all of a sudden you became more animated. You move a little bit more. You became more passionate. Your voice started to change and you have more pauses. By adding more pauses throughout, by varying your vocal variety, your tonality, and also your body language to go with it, you will make your speech going from simply color version to 4K. Now let me list out a number of things that you did right that actually points me to that credibility issue. Number one, you were prepared. You came out and we know you have done your research, you've read, you have do the contrast and see what's going on. You came out firing with participation. You made us raise our hands whether we have children or not. There's a kinesthetic. There's involvement with the audience. You had knowledge, you had structure. Not only did you give us a picture of what the Tiger Mom is like, defined it a little bit, and telling us that it's not only for Chinese, but it happens, and not only for male or female, it happens all over the place. And then you end up going with your recommendation, with your 1, 2, 3, and you summarize your suggestion as to how we should handle our children, whether we choose to be a tiger dad, mom, or not. You use her story, the author's story, and all these things add up together that make you very credible, very much that we want to understand and follow your instruction. Now, you have done it, as I said before, with your vocal variety and your body language. Now, explode that, accentuate it. This is not the twilight of your public speaking career, only the beginning. Thank you, General Evaluator.
Thank you, Roger. Excellent evaluation. 2 for 2 with our group tonight. Wonderful. Okay, our third and final speaker, Lois, who had the off-the-cuff, out-of-the-pocket, from the sleeve speech, will be evaluated by Murali. Mr. Murali, please take it away, sir.
Thank you, Louis. Thank you very much for coming up with an impromptu speech. That shows your courage. Men are from Mars and women are from Venus. And women tend to give a long title for the speech. You have given me the title, and probably the Toastmaster didn't get the title. So you have used a bit of your time to say the title for yourself. It is a full of interesting speech. Pranks. Pranks makes everyone happy, even though the affected person initially is a little bit angry, but overall, the moment later, he is also going to join on the laughter. So that is the way that you have described each and every prank in your speech. Of course, some of the pranks were elaborate, so you made it sound so elaborate, so we accept they are elaborate. And as you said, you made a very smart and short prank. And that is a very effective one. So you came to the point saying that your title is the right one. I really want to accept that portion of it. So coming back to the objectives of the speech, I have a little suggestion for you. Of course, this is an off-the-cuff speech, so I don't want to be too critical of it. So it is coming, you said it is going to be an organize your speech. The organize your speech, initially you are supposed to tell the audience that how many points are going to be there in your speech. So that part is a little bit missing, but through the course of the speech, it has come. We are coming to know that you are going to do this 2 pranks by the men, which are going to be elaborate, and 1 prank by woman, which are going to be short and smart. So that is the way you have elaborated it. I enjoyed your speech, and thank you again for coming up with a short and impromptu speech. Thank you, Louis. Back to Lou.
Thank you, Murali. Just a quick note for those who may otherwise not know. Lois is Lois, and Louis, me, is Louis. I know there's oftentimes can be confused, but, and this is not to point to you directly, Murali, because we've heard it before with lots of other folks whose English is a second language. But I only point it out because sometimes it's confusing for she and I. We're not sure who folks are referring to. Anyway, think of a Lou, oo, for me, and an O, low, for Lois.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thank you as well and for the wonderful evaluation. Okay, we are running short on time. I want to get through things very quickly with respect to reports, but before we do that, timer, please let us know if all of our evaluators qualified.
All were within time, yes.
Wonderful. Please send your vote to Jim Barber for best evaluator. Thank you, Jim, for your pick of best evaluator, and we'll go quickly into reports. Now, David, you have posted the timing requirements in the chat box, I believe, so I don't believe you have any other aspects of timing that you'd like to share. If you do, feel free to. Okay, excellent. Let's go to watcher Graham Carnes. Please give us a quick report on what you watched this evening.
Very quickly, Mr. General Evaluator, there was nothing bad. There were a couple of green screen issues, most notably the pink hair that Lois has already seen referred to in the chat box. These things happen. It's not a great drama. I would also commend Lois, on the other hand, on the use of her hands. When she was making a gesture, it was really effective because she brought the hand close to the camera, and that worked really well. With Roger and I noticed a number of times during the meeting that our heads were down, but that was because we were jotting. That's something we need to be aware of when we're on camera. Don't drop your head to write because nobody wants to see the top of our heads. But in general terms, everybody's lighting was good. The backgrounds were great. I commend everybody on their efforts today to make sure that we looked good.
That sounded like a period. Thank you, sir. Appreciate that. And by the way, Dave, in case I didn't mention it, just we'll give 1 minute for these final reports. Let's go to Mr. John Quick for our chat box, chat monitor. Ooh, Mr. Quick,
I think John may have gone, but he has added a whole lot of stuff into the chat box.
Oh, very good. Then please read the chat box and feel free to print it out at the end, which you can do so from going into the chat box, clicking more, and I believe save chat. That'll save a copy to a special folder in your computer. Okay, I also served as grammarian, so I will quickly summarize just a couple things. Jim Dent, as part of your speech, I echoed something that the evaluator already said in terms of I'm not going to let a computer tell me what to do. Use the word overburdened. Now, your speech was also of a much more, I guess I'll say, technical nature, so there was, I guess, not great opportunity as you would be with storytelling for using some creative language, but, you know, a very engaging speech as in the end of the day. I do wish to caution you about what I'll call, oh boy, what do you call this when you say wanna instead of want to? Those, I'm not going to say laziness, but you know where I'm going.
Contractions. Contractions of
well,
speech.
it's sort of contraction, but it's slack. That's a great word to say. Slack.
Yeah.
And also, you had one point where you said what do they don't want to do? I was a little confusing. I wasn't sure if that was a double negative, but I'm sure you caught yourself there. Doug Morris, your title, Tiger Mom, wonderful. You used the word revered, which I just think is a great word to use. Your speech was also very engaging, and you said paint different kids with the same brush. Now, as far as language issues for folks whose English is a second language, there are some issues with respect to tense, but I understand that's the difficulty for you folks, so I'm not going to really point that out, but just keep practicing with respect to that. That's my report as grammarian, and I wanted to leave a counter for the end because I'm sure I had a few in there myself, so please, Mr. Sam Moran, Sam I am, please give us your report as a counter.
Certainly, Mr. Evaluator. Jim Bent, I only had one double clutch and a couple of ends. They were not part of the speech. Dagmara, souls. We had about 8 or 10 there. Deborah, we have one soul. Andy, I was in Twilight Zone. I didn't get anything out of you. And Morale, I have 3 souls and 1 double clutch, and that was that, and you did it actually twice. Lou, I'm sorry, Louis, I had 1 double clutch only. And Graham, I had 1 and a soul. Roger, I had a and 2 souls. And Lou, I'll let you skip because I didn't pay attention to your filler words. So you had none. And
Thank
that's
you.
it for my report.
Excellent. Thank you, Sam. Appreciate that. I believe, does our Toastmaster do I hand it back to President or Toastmaster with respect to the final words and
Why don't you give Rolando a chance to close out?
okay, back to you, Mr. Toastmaster.
Thank you, General Evaluator. Let me quickly announce the winners. The best speaker tonight is Dagmara. Dagmara is the best speaker for tonight. The best table topics for tonight is Mike. Mike, the best table topic winner. And the best evaluator is Roger. Roger is the best evaluator for tonight. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, all the speakers. Thank you, everybody. I just turn control over now to our president, David Carr.
All right. Well, let me just mention, since I was supposed to be modeling how you're supposed to be running the timer roll, I didn't get it quite perfect. One thing is, I guess as timer, it may make sense to just leave your mic unmuted. Try and stay unmuted, so that you can give those audible signals. I have to remind myself, though, that I am on mic at that point, because you can't hear anybody else, and if you're this one guy giggling, that's kind of weird, too. One of the challenges of the online presentation environment is that you don't get the audible feedback from the crowd. You don't know if your jokes are landing quite as well, but that is similar to the professional environment. We do have our video speech contest next week. We do need somebody to play the timer role at that event. Do we have any volunteers, somebody who's not already participating in some other capacity, who can be the timer for next week?
I can do timing, Dave. However, mine is old school timing.
Well,
if you're okay with that.
I think keeping it simple might have a lot to recommend it. Just try and make sure that if you're holding up cards or something, that the colors are distinct enough, because sometimes we can't tell the difference between a green and a yellow, depending on maybe you can try and test that in front of the webcam.
Okay.
Let's see. Any other business that we do need to discuss today? I'm sorry.
In terms of the timer flag, it's best to actually write the words onto the piece of paper, even if you do digital. And that way, if we don't catch the color, we catch the words.
Right. I mean, and that's it. I didn't give Jimmy fair warning. However, I did also say something about as speaker, try and make sure that you locate that video feed from the timer. You guys should have seen green, yellow, and red popping up in the background behind me.
Can I make a suggestion there? Can I make a suggestion, David, which is a continuation, and that is, if you are timer, when you are bringing up the green, if you go and pin yourself as a speaker, that takes you to the front of the screen. Pin yourself for 10 seconds and then let go. That way the speaker will see it, because it will interrupt their screen.
I thought the pinning only worked for, I thought that only affects you yourself.
Does it? I thought it affected everybody else.
Graham,
I don't think so.
Way around. We don't control someone else's screen. So
right.
therefore, another way is for the speaker to pin the timer onto your screen. And
But
it
of
would
course,
not
that wouldn't work in the case of
affect
Jim.
anyone else
Because he-
in the audience.
But does the pinning accomplish anything once they start sharing their screen, or?
Well, the
No, I'm not
share
sure.
screen will be the big screen. And then if I pin you, David, you'll
Okay.
always be on top of that little one.
Okay. Well, we're going to keep working on this. It's a surprisingly difficult problem how to work out the timing in this environment. But I'm sorry, Lou volunteered to do timing for next week, and Jim Dent is going to be our chief judge. He will be in touch to reach out to people who can be judges, who of course will be super secret, double, triple anonymous. But Jim will reach out in the background to make sure that we have some. Any other business that we need to bring up before we break for this evening? Hearing none, have a great week, everybody. Thanks for joining.
Thank you, David. And just before everybody goes, those of you whose districts have not yet rolled out Pathways, when it does, please grab it with both hands. I have found it actually quite innovating. I'm still doing another CC, but I am really, really enjoying Pathways because it is a new approach to Toastmasters.
Good.
Save your chat box. I've added 2 links throughout the chat. One is the Better Speaker series. You have a download link. And 2 is a folder full of pathway documents that I share with, I am a pathway guy that I share with the clubs that I support. You can